Welcome to the crypto trading channel. My name is Stu. Guys, Bitcoin saw a nice little rally today, but are we losing steam or is this actually sustainable? Also, what's in store for the longer term outlook for Bitcoin? I actually had a friend point out something to me on the weekly chart, so I want to share my thoughts on that. But first, I want to just take a quick look at the midterm trend for Bitcoin, starting on the 4-hourly here, you guys. Really, with the 4-hour, nothing has really changed for me yet. It's not so much that we look all too bearish at this point. It is nice that rather than just immediately setting a new low here, we have been forming some consolidation and trying to build some support here. However, something to keep in mind is that, like I said, nothing has really changed from my analysis yet, and that includes this confirmed lower high on the trend, just because as far as the 4-hour structure goes, this would have been our last low before we set our new lowest low. Highest point between the two is that guy right there, right around 77K. So at this point, even if we end up climbing a little bit higher, I just have my concerns if we end up getting up to that level, right? So it's not so much that I'm overly bearish on this level. However, that being said, in a downtrend, no matter how you feel about the market, you just have to respect resistance in a downtrend. When we end up breaking structure to the downside like this and then getting a retest of that resistance level, especially the first test, we really just need to be cautious at those levels, whether that means taking a short position, just a little hedge short, or taking profits off a long position if you have longs at that point. And basically avoiding FOMO into those resistance levels. If you have a riding position from much lower and we get up to those levels, yeah, you know what, maybe consider taking some profits, but just to enter new leveraged long positions right into resistance is where a lot of people go wrong, because the price always looks strongest when we hit those levels. So, I mean, at this point, that is still my concern. We have just been basically continuing this downtrend for, well, a long time at this point. I mean, this immediate downtrend basically started here around 98K, because basically we lost our uptrend here, right? I was actually bullish temporarily in this zone. Even when we came back here, I was a little bit bullish, but once we ended up breaking that trend, unfortunately, the bears were in full control once again, you guys. So one thing that I want to mention as far as much further targets, which would take a while to play out likely, is if we end up invalidating this bearish trend and we do break that 77K level, at that point, I would consider the micro trend on the 4-hour broken. And that's where I would start to expect that, hey, it's very realistic to think that we could bounce to some resistance of the much bigger range, right? And this swing basically, like I just said, started around 98K here. So if we pull a fib from there, it is quite likely that we would end up struggling a little bit when we start getting closer to that 89, 90K level once again. Obviously, that resistance does aim a lot higher, but just something to keep in mind if we do end up smashing through some of this resistance, that we just have more potential resistance ahead. Bringing up the chart prime indicators here as well to look for a little bit of confluence, you guys. And one thing I noticed, this orange box here, this is the money flow point of control. And notice that it lines up right on my 786. I mean, just higher by, well, that's probably a few $100s or whatever, but basically right on my 786 there. And on top of that, we have this other indicator, this band down here. Notice where this resistance is lining up here, right? We had our bearish cross up here, and now we have, well, a couple of resistance levels, right? And that's kind of my main concern with Bitcoin at this point, you guys, is just because we've been in such a nasty downtrend for the last 4 months or so. Even if Bitcoin does well, there's so much resistance ahead, and this indicator just lining up with that 77K level is just a good reminder of that. And guys, for those of you who are interested in seeing just way more examples of how I'm looking at market structure in general, some of my trade setups, strategies, warnings, and so on, be sure to scan the QR code to gain access to my Telegram, which now, due to our exclusive partnership with Prime Automation, will also grant you free unlimited algo bot trading as well. I had mentioned that this morning, that although I was not comfortable myself taking longs on this market, at least I ended up having a couple of bots catching some of those long positions for me. So that's very cool there. And to top it all off, guys, my partners at Blowfin are also celebrating this partnership with giving this special promotion for new signups under us until February 20th. So if this amazing free deal interests you, be sure to scan the QR code on the screen. And actually, guys, I received this very impressive feedback from an absolute legend earlier today who's been trading the STUBER fib strategy for quite a while now. Absolutely smashing it. Account up 30% while Bitcoin is down 30%, and was able to enjoy a nice holiday recently while absolutely crushing the market. I absolutely love to see this, my friends, and just goes to show what having a level head with a systematic strategy can achieve. So if you are in here in the stream, bro, thank you for that. Truly appreciate that. And of course, just some more testimonies over the last little bit there. So but yeah, hopping back into the charts, you guys, like I said, there was something on the weekly I wanted to check out, and that's actually a STUBER fib pulled from this low right here at about, you know what, let's just call it 50K. But so here's the thing. I honestly, when it comes to the weekly chart right now, I have very mixed feelings about it. You guys know for quite a while that I have been targeting basically 40K and kind of looking at the start of October for that. But yeah, this one was pointed out to me that doesn't make sense that we could pull a fib from this level here on the trend. Now, here's the thing about this level. First, I want to go over my concerns with this level is that I don't like, typically speaking, when I look at STUBER fib setups, let's say it's the 5 minute, the 1 hour, the 4 hour, whatever, I always treat market structure the same, is that when we lose the immediate trend, and that would have been up here, was when we actually lost our confirmed higher low on the trend. And since then, we've obviously setting lower low, et cetera, et cetera. So we've already lost the micro trend. And I say micro, it's obviously a very long trend because this is the weekly chart. But as far as the weekly structure goes, this is that micro structure. So we lost that. At that point, that's where I want to start pulling the fibs from where the swing actually started. And being this is the macro time frame on the weekly, that means that it would be the full cycle basically. So I don't really like to pull fibs from every from basically every pivot that we had along the way. Although there is a few other interesting things lining up with this level. I don't want to necessarily say that it's not possible. However, again, it's just something to be cautious of, especially, we can look at the monthly chart as well with the exact same fib pull here. And same thing, except you can actually see the structure that broke. And I mean, I guess to be fair, this candle has about 15 days left, right? We're only halfway through this monthly candle, but this structure is very clean on the monthly chart that we had this high here. Let me just make that wait. We had that high, and we obviously have a higher high, this being our confirmed higher low on the trend. And so far we are smashing through that market structure. So on the monthly, that actually looks quite bad in my opinion. One thing to consider is there could be one heck of a bounce, even if this is a bearish structure or a bearish trend forming here. Because you guys know that if I was on the 5 minute, for example, this is where I'd be looking for a bearish fib pull from our pivot point, basically. And that would put resistance all the way up at about, starting at around 112K. So it is very far away. There would be, I'm not saying that would happen anytime soon, but just it's another one of those things to plan ahead that based on the macro structure, you just know that the FOMO in the market would be going absolutely insane if we end up getting back towards all-time highs. But in my opinion, that could be recipe for disaster to people start longing into resistance once again, and then getting into an even deeper correction. But I have mixed feelings about that. Like I said, I'm actually going to get rid of the monthly. That's all I had to talk about on the monthly. But with the weekly, there is a little bit more to it that would line up with the theory that this could technically be bottom. And that would be basically, well, on the 3D trend here, this is obviously a very bearish sign right here. The fact that we ended up basically retesting when it flipped red or orange, I guess. Generally speaking, that has been a very strong macro indicator for which way the trend is going. But one thing to consider is how aggressively this sell-off has happened. that it's possible that, again, we could get one heck of a bounce while indicators catch up and that sort of thing. So that indicator still bearish at this time, but obviously we're just getting a little overextended because we're getting far away from it. But bringing up the other chart prime indicators here, this is kind of where I become a little bit interested here, is just like I was talking about on the 4 hour, but out on the weekly here, we have that money flow point of control just barely below where we ended up finding bottom so far. So if that is going to remain a very strong point of control here, it's very possible that we do end up finding support. Either a possible bottom has already happened, or maybe we get some sort of a flush, maybe even a rough capitulation for a couple weeks and do see much lower targets, but basically end up bottoming soon. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. Actually, what I'm hoping for, I really don't care what happens as far as trading goes, but everyone likes to be a moon boy, myself included. I would love to have some sort of an alt season, some sort of a parabolic run. That's obviously the easiest kind of market conditions to trade generally. But also the downside is very fun. I love trading the downside, shorting the market. I absolutely love doing that in crypto as well. So I don't really care from a trader's point of view. But as far as my spot investments, I would love to end up seeing support hold very soon here. And also not only that money flow point of control, but obviously you can see these basically these green ribbons here, that on the macro chart like this, we've really never lost this thicker green band before. So at this point, that's lining up very closely with that point of control, which is just a little bit lower, maybe around 55K, 56K, somewhere in there. Something to consider there. We haven't really ever stayed below it for long. I mean, at the start, well, this would have been, I guess, the FTX collapse basically pushed us below it, but we never really ended up pushing into a new bearish trend from there. That was more so the end of it. So right now, and honestly, guys, even looking at this indicator and zooming in, this is the only time it has not been green, right? It's been very bright green this whole time, other than when we were right here, but it never did flip red, right? It turned gray, so it went a little bit neutral. But as soon as we reclaimed it, actually got a beautiful buy signal there. Even this indicator just absolutely smashes the weekly from the looks of it here. But right now, notice that we are starting to lose that green color there as well, and starting to flip into more of a gray, and even almost looks a little purple. So we might be getting a little red in there. So being we have never really lost and flipped this indicator on a weekly, I honestly don't know what would happen if we do. I feel like, it's possible that it would end up pushing us much lower. But at this point, we don't really have much data suggesting what would happen. Obviously, the lower time frame one has flipped bearish a few times. But as far as that bigger one, it's never really happened. So we'll have to see. But yeah, it's just nice to see that those indicator confluences are lining up with that fib pocket there. So although that's not how I would typically pull a STUBER fib, there is some confluences involved there. You guys know I've been talking about this one for a while. I still think that the market cycle bottoms, well, I mean, the last couple anyways, for the last couple cycles have been exactly 204 weeks away. So everyone says it's a 4-year cycle, but it's actually just slightly different. What would be 4 weeks shorter or whatever. So not exactly 4 weeks, but so far we are getting the same cycle, right? The amount of time from our lows to our highs, and just how things have been lining up. And this is why I've been kind of talking about the fact that I thought that Bitcoin would go down to my STUBER fib, but more so by the start of October, which would obviously take a long time to play out if that's going to happen. The thing is, right now, we are closer to that target than we are all-time highs at this point. And I'm not sure if the market is going to, I mean, either I think we are close to reversing early, or I think that we would end up flushing and end up hitting those levels much earlier than predicted here. And my reasoning for that is basically why I think that we have either bottomed or getting very close to bottom based on this chart. And like I said earlier, this could mean, like, when I say close to a bottom, it could be a very violent push to the downside for a week or two and end up testing my bigger support levels. That would, in my opinion, the most healthy thing Bitcoin could do would be absolutely nuke to 40K within the next few weeks and find support from there. I don't think that's how it's going to play out, but it would just be the healthiest way, because then we would be testing macro support and just getting the move over with. And on top of that, lining up with when the RSI on the weekly is in oversold conditions, right? We are hitting that 30 level here. Generally speaking, when Bitcoin has hit these levels on the RSI on the weekly, it's generally marked a bottom. That being said, something like right here, the bottom actually happened a little later. We did go oversold, but we did get that one more push to the downside while getting a bullish divergence on the RSI here. So of course, that's very possible. It's also possible this market cycle doesn't play out like others, and maybe this is the first time where we see it on the weekly, because we see it on shorter time frames all the time. But when the RSI goes into oversold territory, it actually means there's a ton of selling pressure. It actually means there's just a shit ton of strength, right? The RSI, relative strength index. So in a downtrend, when the RSI is down here, generally speaking, it's just saying there's a lot of strength for the bears. But on the weekly, since the weekly is just in a long-term push to the upside, generally speaking, that does actually mean that it's oversold. So we'll have to see if that plays out a little bit differently this time. Going into the more degenerate timeframes on the 5-minute, guys, something that I just kind of mentioned to my Telegram earlier was I think it's time to be careful right now, just because I'm seeing mixed signals right now for where we are, right? We got that nice push to the upside. I warned about that last night. Basically, I think there was a STUBER fib down here that I ended up taking. And I said that if it ended up getting invalidated, yeah, actually, I think this is what it was. And I said that if it ends up getting invalidated, I would actually be cutting my losses quick, and I'd actually be locking in another one of my shorts that I had from the day before, just because I think it's quite realistic that we would end up shooting back to the top of this range here, just because it was such a straight shot to the downside that it was very likely we end up pushing right back to the upside. And that's exactly what ended up happening, right? So as it stands right now, though, is this sustainable? I have mixed feelings on this again, so it is time to be a little bit cautious right now, just because of how things have formed. But here is where we basically have a high and a higher high. Therefore, we have this confirmed higher low right here. So as far as just naked market structure goes, we do still have bullish structure here, because until the high here or the low here breaks, we are just in this range, and so far momentum is to the upside. So as far as just the market structure on the 5-minute goes, we still have bullish. However, at this point, we did already test the STUBER fib once. We had one play out very nicely, right? We came down to the 786. We hit my first target, the 0.5 fib. We hit the second target, the 214 fib. So at this point, although yes, we technically have a little bit of support below us, it may be a little bit weakened right now, just because that setup has played out already. So that's something to just consider at this time right now. And just to bring some indicators into the mix, once again, these chart prime indicators, let's see what they are saying. And notice once again that money flow point of control is basically, the price has been basically hugging that level for the last couple of hours here. And so it does look like we are starting to lose it. I was kind of hoping, for the bull's sake, that we would end up turning that money flow into support. And but that doesn't mean that all hope is lost, right? We still do have these green ribbons down here, or these green support bars, whatever. One thing to consider with them is, although they haven't flipped red and bearish yet, we did get this bearish cross of these bands, right? Just like where would we have got our bullish cross? Yeah, we got our bullish cross right here. And now we are getting this bearish cross. So this could still end up flipping back the other way, where this guy ends up crossing over something like that again. that would be great to see from a bullish perspective. It's not that this has flipped into resistance yet. It's not even red yet. It is starting to change color a little bit. But again, just that cross there just makes me think that we're losing a little bit of momentum. So if the price ends up doing something like this and the indicators start doing basically, or this one would start like this, right? Because they've already crossed. So if the indicators start flipping red and the price ends up dropping below, I think that's a strong, basically strong confluence that we are starting to show some weakness here. And I think we would end up retesting, well, just basically getting some sort of a pullback, right? So if I go back to just basic market structure here, looking for where that would change, just like what I was talking about on the weekly, right? It's not that I would be pulling a fib from here, for example, because that's just another random support level along the way. Whereas if we lose this microstructure, I'd be looking for more where the swing started, and that's where we bottomed back here. So I would have a fib pull something like that. That's why I have my purple Stuber fib box down here and my green swing fail zone down there. So if we end up losing this range that we're currently trading in on the 5-minute, I wouldn't be too surprised to see us end up coming down and retesting that support. As well, just lining up with that is a very nice diagonal resistance line that I would like to see that flip into support as well. So if we end up dumping, I mean, it would actually take quite an aggressive push to the downside to end up lining up with this diagonal trend line retest inside some of my support fib pockets here. But if those things line up, I think it would be strong confluence for taking a bit of a scalp to the long side at that point. But we're going to have to see what happens. Right now, like I said, it's a little up in the air what happens on the immediate term right now. Basically, what I would want to see, since the bullish scenario of this range has already played out, is a couple of things that we could watch for now would be if we end up taking out this high, right? Because our range is currently something like this. So either I would want to see the bulls push to a new high, in which case I would be looking at more so scalp long for, at that point, we would have a new confirmed, we'd have a new higher high. Therefore, we'd have a new confirmed higher low on the trend. So I would be pulling a fib basically from our lowest point between the two, something like that, and looking for a Stuber entry, something like that. If on the other side of things, we end up losing our support level, then it's possible we get some sort of a Stuber short setup, where then we would basically have, this is our current low, that would then give us our lower low, and the highest point between the two basically is up here, right? So I would be pulling a fib something like this to look for a bearish setup. So we kind of need to see the market just form some new structure at this point, basically, just because, like I said, support is support until it's broken. But just the fact that this fib setup has already played out once, I generally only like to take those Stuber fib setups the first try, because those levels get weak the more they're tested, basically. I'm not going to take a look at SUI just because I got to get going here, but I will take a look at SUI on a couple different time frames and post it in the Telegram chat as soon as I can here. Because, yeah, guys, I just really wanted to take a quick look at Bitcoin today. So for those of you, like I said earlier, for those of you interested in seeing way more examples of how I'm looking at market structure, you know, some of my trade setups, how I'm looking at fibs, just some of my strategies, warnings, and so on, be sure to scan the QR code on the screen to gain access to my Telegram group, which now, due to our exclusive partnership with Prime Automation, will also grant you free unlimited algo bot trading as well. And as I mentioned, to top it all off, Blofin is also currently giving you guys a special sign-up promo until February 20th. So if this free deal interests you, be sure to scan the QR code on the screen. And yeah, that's about all I wanted to go over. So one last time, guys, if you did appreciate this live stream and you like these market updates, do me a favor, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And of course, my friends, thank you so much for being here with me once again. Really appreciate each and every one of you for taking your time to be here with me. Stay safe out there, my friends,